hopefully this is working, everyone. My computer's just doing some weird things when I've tried to record, but I'll start the lecture and figure out whether it's recorded in, I don't know, half an hour or something. So hopefully you're all with me. Welcome to Organisational Behaviour, Buzzy 1029. I'm Dr. Robert Cluley. In this video, we're going to talk about motivation, a key concept in organisational behaviour, particularly within the field of organisational psychology. So by the end of this session, you should hopefully be able to distinguish three different ways of thinking about motivation within organisations. We're going to talk about what are known as content theories of motivation, process theories of motivation, and instrumental theories of motivation. Each of these is a different way of explaining what it is that gets people firstly to join organisations, and then finally to participate and give as much effort as they can towards the organisation. So the core reading for this is Kaczynski and Buchanan's chapter 8 in the 6th edition and chapter 9 in the 9th edition, I believe. So let's have a little bit of background. Hopefully, in your other classes, you've heard something about scientific management and Taylorism, and perhaps also something about what's known as the human relations school, sometimes associated with the Tavistock Institute, often illustrated through a very famous set of research studies known as the Hawthorne studies. For those of you that are new to those ideas, there was a set of studies associated with this idea called the human relations school, which rather revolutionised organisational thinking. Up to the Hawthorne studies, people had largely thought about motivation in terms of money. There's two reasons for this. One is it fits in with the sort of economics view of people in organisations, but it had also been shown to be incredibly effective in the work of Frederick Taylor, an early management consultant. Taylor had found that if you wanted to increase people's effort, you firstly needed to design their work in such a way that it was as effective and as efficient as possible, but then also offer them a really good wage. And if you did this, you would attract the best people and they would be committed to working the hardest. Taylor even introduced a system of piece rate pay, where people would be paid not a set amount, nor a set amount for a time that they worked, but a set amount for the amount of output they produced. So the idea in Taylorism was you used what we would now call extrinsic rewards, things that exist outside of people, money, and if you arranged the payments to people correctly, you could motivate them or get them to do as much work for you as you wanted. The problem with Taylorism, the problem with extrinsic rewards, was highlighted by a series of studies associated with the human relations school, notably the Hawthorne studies. What the Hawthorne studies and the human relations school started to notice was that workers, members of organisations who were motivated purely through extrinsic motivation, were firstly quite costly, and secondly, they were also very, very calculative. They would start to figure out the best way to minimise their effort and maximise their extrinsic reward, maximise their pay. They would engage in things like chiselling, which we've talked about in a previous video, where a group of workers would get together and all agree they would only work at a certain rate. They would restrict their output collectively so that nobody could be paid bonuses, and they could then argue everybody needed to be paid bonuses. These kinds of discoveries led managers to realise that actually, whilst extrinsic rewards had a purpose and a function and could motivate some people some of the time, they didn't motivate all of the people all of the time. And this led to a focus on what's called intrinsic rewards or intrinsic motivation, which is things that motivate us that are internal, psychological thoughts and psychological processes. And this led to the human relations school, who focused much more on the relationships that form within organisations as being the things which motivate us above money. So this forms something of the background to the study of motivations in organisational research. Once theorists and researchers recognised the power of intrinsic motivations, they started to try to theorise or to explain what kinds of things intrinsically motivated people and how did they work. And this led to a number of different ideas and perspectives, ideas that we're going to look at throughout this lecture. So there's a couple of terms which we can go through, and it's useful to sort of distinguish them and associate them, I think, with some of the theories that we're going to look at. So firstly, when we talk about motivation, sometimes people confuse what we might call drives with motivation. A drive is often described as an innate biological determinant of a behaviour. So when we're hungry, we're motivated to eat, but really we're being driven to eat by a biological process. It's not psychological, it's not about our thought process, our body's making us do something. When we feel tired, we want to sleep, not because we've been motivated extrinsically or intrinsically, but because our bodies just need us to sleep. By and large, in studies of motivation, we exclude drives for a variety of reasons, but one of which is just for practical purposes, we can't really use them to do things. And instead we focus on motives or motivations. And these are socially activated, I should put here, activated desires that need fulfillment. So a good example would be from your lives as consumers. If a friend of yours gets a new iPhone, that could activate a desire in you to get a new iPhone. It creates a want or a need which you feel like you have to fulfill, and you're not happy until you've gone and got a new phone. This would be a motive. So it's not being driven by your biology, not by your physical body. It's being driven by your psychology and your social relationships. So this is what we're talking about when we talk about motivation. How is it that organisations can socially activate these desires? And there's three broad explanations. We've got content theories which focus on particular goals or ends. They try to understand what is it that actually motivates us. What are the things people want to get to be fulfilled? These we're going to call content theories. So what's the content of motivation? Then there are theories which look at motivation in terms of thought processes, decision-making processes. And these we can call process theories. And finally we've got instrumental theories or influence theories, which think about how we can actually motivate people in practice, not just simply explain what motivates people and how motivation works, but think about how we can actually use those ideas to influence people in practice. So we're going to call those instrumental theories. So let's dive into it. Content theories. Content theories are thinking about what is it that actually motivates people. The classic content theory would be Taylor's ideas of money, extrinsic rewards. But influenced by the human relations movement, a number of different theories have been put forward to explain what motivates people. A very noticeable one is Sigmund Freud's ideas. Sigmund Freud is a very famous psychologist, not so much of organisation theory. He was more interested in understanding a variety of social phenomena. But he developed a theory of motivation. Freud argued that all of us are driven by some set instincts. These involve fear, selfish needs, so the idea that we want to be powerful, we want to be in control, and we have these instincts which are built into us from an early age, often shaped by our childhood, that influence our behaviour. These instincts require fulfilment, and we'll find ways to fulfill them. For example, it's been shown in organisations that many people who attain positions of power and end up engaging in things like abusive supervision and authoritarian leadership are often driven by need for power, selfish needs or narcissistic needs. They can sometimes be driven ambivalently by fear, a fear of being abused can lead people to abuse other people. So Freud's argument, and this is associated with a body of thinking called psychoanalysis, is that there are these inbuilt instincts which we can uncover and expose and understand, and then start to trace back to explain people's behaviour, to understand what motivates people by thinking about these instinctual drives that they fulfill. In recent decades, there's been a move called neuropsychoanalysis to actually use neuroscience to try to tease out specifically what these instincts are and to see, is there a reason why people tend to be driven by particular instincts, such as the need for power. And neuroscientists agree that there is something like a list of 7 instincts which seem to drive people's behaviour, seem to motivate us. So Freud's is a content theory which focuses on our instinctual desires, our unconscious desires. There's some other ideas we can look at as content theories of motivation. Viktor Frankl is associated with the body of thinking around existentialism. He coined the term logotherapy. And Frankl's idea is that what motivates people is having some kind of meaning to their life, having some kind of purpose to their life. And typically that purpose comes from their community or their relations with others. Frankl said what truly motivates people is to feel like they're making a difference in the world, to making a positive contribution to their community. His justification for this was his experience in concentration camps in Nazi Germany. And Frankl observed that some of the most weak and vulnerable people could survive horrendous atrocities, whereas some of the strongest, most confident people couldn't last 5 minutes in the harsh brutality of a concentration camp. And he wanted to understand why. And his explanation on speaking to people was the people that survived had a reason for surviving. It might be they had family outside, it might be that they had religion, it might be that they just felt desperately that they wanted to get back to their community and start rebuilding. These people who had a purpose to their life, a reason to live, were able to survive. And after the war, Frankl expanded this and said, this is probably what's true of everybody. And he argued that when people don't have a positive purpose that's motivating them, they tend to replace it with things that don't really ever motivate them. So they'll tend to replace it, say, with consumer goods. They'll go and buy lots of things, or they might be voracious. They might look to sexuality or personal relationships as a way of replacing some purpose to their life. But Frankl said, as a psychologist, people were never truly happy with these things. They were only truly happy once they discovered some higher purpose which allowed them to feel like their life was making a positive contribution to the world. So for an organisational theorist, Frankl's ideas really link back to the notion of an organisation's goals. If an organisation has some values that are making a positive contribution to its wider society, this can motivate people far more than any extrinsic rewards. So this is Frankl's idea. Another example of a content theory of motivation. A really famous organisational theory, so the thing to note with Freud and Frankl is they weren't writing about organisations, although their ideas have been applied to organisations. But there are some people that did write directly about organisations, and an example of this is McGregor. McGregor looked at organisations and found staff and managers can develop essentially 2 types of relationships, which he called Theory X and Theory Y. The Theory X view of motivation assumes that staff will have their arms folded. That's why it's called X. It's supposed to be like a man with their arm, or a woman with his or her arms folded. And McGregor said this is one theory of motivation. He called it Theory X, which suggests people don't really want to work. People don't really want to contribute to their organisations. And so the job of managers isn't to give them some purpose or to help fulfill their instinctive drives. It's rather to force people to actually work. It's to get people that are, and I think we used the term in a previous video, recalcitrant, people that don't want to work. It's to make them work. And they do this by very authoritarian styles of leadership, very structured work, clear hierarchies, having the ability to tell people what to do. McGregor calls this theory X. An alternative theory, which managers can have, is to view staff as being motivated by theory Y. And theory Y is supposed to be like a picture of a person with their arms up, kind of saying, yes. So here, we assume that people are motivated to participate in organisations, that they find their purpose from their experiences in organisations, and therefore managers' job isn't to tell people what to do, it's to channel people's intrinsic motivation. It's to give them a reason to be motivated by their work. So this is McGregor's theory X and theory Y. Next we come to another famous content theory developed by Maslow. You've probably heard of this. It's a very famous idea that we see in popular culture quite regularly. The idea of a hierarchy of needs, moving from drives or biological requirements up through motivations. So Maslow's argument is, as we go higher up through this hierarchy, we start to get motivated by things. Lower down, we just need things. So he said, when we have biological requirements like we need food, we're not motivated, we need the food. If we're not safe, if we're threatened, we're not motivated to feel safe. We need to feel safe because otherwise we'd be endangered. But as we start to get up to elements like affiliation, the need for relationships with people, the need for esteem, the need to feel good about ourselves, the need to develop knowledge and understanding, well, now we're starting to be motivated because these aren't things that we need to have. They're things which motivate us that we typically like to have. And Maslow's argument was people typically, once they have satisfied a need lower down on the hierarchy, will start to spend more time being motivated by ones higher up. So once we've met our biological requirements, once we feel safe, once we feel like we've got a community around us and we feel good about ourselves, we'll start to seek knowledge and understanding. Once we've got knowledge and understanding of the world, we'll start to look for beauty or aesthetics. Once we've appreciated beauty and aesthetics and art, we'll start to look for transcendence. We'll want what's sometimes called flow experiences. We want to be able to lose ourselves in our activities. And then we'll want freedom. We'll want to be able to do what we want with our time. We'll want to have freedom of inquiry, freedom of expression. And then finally we'll get to this quite mythical state which he called self-actualization, where we'll be able to engage in activities which we feel just reveal who we are just so motivating, so intrinsically motivating and so attached to us that they'll just be completely fulfilling for us. Now, this hierarchy has led to lots and lots of criticisms, but fundamentally it probably makes sense to a lot of people that, if you're meant to go to work and you feel unsafe, you're unlikely to spend your time, developing knowledge and understanding. You're probably going to try to make sure that you don't die. If you go to work and you don't have any food, you're probably not going to spend your time thinking about art. You're going to think about how can I get some food. So there is an essential truth to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but it is, again, worth repeating, although you'll see this in every textbook ever written about organisations. Maslow didn't write it about organisational behaviour, unlike McGregor. McGregor's is a theory of behaviour in organisations. We've got a couple more content theories to go, so we'll just have a quick look through these. Alderfer in 1972 built on Maslow's ideas, the idea that there is set things that we are looking for. But he said actually Maslow got it wrong because there are fewer needs and motivators than he said. And Alderfer argued that we basically have existence needs, so biological needs, the need for safety. We have relatedness needs, which is we need to feel loved, we need to have relationships with other people. And then we have growth needs. We need to feel like we are improving ourselves, whether that's physically improving ourselves, mentally improving ourselves, psychologically or spiritually improving ourselves. And Alpha argued, much like Maslow, that these things can work in a hierarchy, and that ultimately organisations which only fulfil existence needs or relatedness needs will always be outperformed by those that also provide growth needs. Finally, in content theories, and this is really just an example of a range of approaches, we have Ritchie and Martin, who developed the idea of a need profile. And their argument was that there are individuals who have a very high need when they're in organisations. They have a high need from their organisations. They need their organisation to satisfy or motivate them. And then there are those who have a low need. So they don't look to their organisation to motivate them. And they studied over 1,000 managers and found that we can actually quite neatly position people in terms of their attitudes and beliefs as to whether they are high need individuals or low need individuals. And it's useful to think about yourself in these terms. So let's just pick a few examples. They said people who are high need individuals who look for organisations to provide some motivation for them. They want useful work. They want to feel like they're doing something really important in the world. Low need individuals, in contrast, just think, well, it's all work. I don't really care. I can clock off. I can switch off once I've finished my work. We have high need individuals who look for recognition and appreciation from other people at work. They want positive feedback. They're people that want their boss to give them a pat on the back. They want to get promoted, so on and so forth. Low need individuals don't really care. They're insensitive to other people's opinion. And why? Well, because they don't really care about work. They don't really care about their involvement in the organisation. They probably just want to get paid and go out and do what they want to do. High need individuals are very open-minded. They want to be creative. They want to feel like they're participating in their organisation. But low need individuals are just going to turn up to work and do what they're told. They're not curious. So, you can read through these in more detail yourselves, but hopefully you can see how each one is based on a particular content theory, a particular set of things people look for from organisations. It's quite similar to McGregor's Theory X and Theory Y. And this is really one of the focuses of content theory, which is differed from the likes of Maslow, Frankl and Freud. When applied to organisations, content theorists have had to try to understand why is it that some people really want their organisation to motivate them. They want intrinsic rewards and intrinsic motivations. But there are other people who just don't seem bothered. There are Theory X staff as well as Theory Y staff. So, okay, we've spent a bit of time now talking about different content theories of motivation. We'll pause the video here, and in the next video, we'll carry on and think about some process theories and instrumental theories of motivation.